Speaking of keeping track of potential clients, let's dive into attribution. So, Rand Fishkin of Spark Toro wrote a post, provable
How do we
marketing,
really know Rand Fishkin? Why do we know Rand Fishkin?
because he was the Wizard of
He
Moz.
was the Wizard of Moz.
And he was a guest on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, I
He was
believe.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super smart. Very cool stuff he's doing at Spark Toro. But he wrote a post that says that attribution is a boondoggle, and instead you should trust your gut, especially if you're a smaller or medium-sized business, you're not enterprise, and you're not investing in a very expensive attribution system. And even the most expensive, fancy attribution systems still have limitations. And so don't lose the forest for the trees. Trust your gut, because there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of marketing and business development, like word of mouth referrals and blah, blah, blah. That's legit. That's my interpretation of just you. I don't want to put words in Rand's mouth. So you decide, you read it and decide for yourself what Rand has to say. But it made us want to dive deeper on attribution.
So my take on this, and I think Rand is, as Rand frequently does, using a counter perspective to generate attention for Rand. It's also
Great marketer.
Great marketer, right? Great marketing. It worked. I'm not even saying that in a negative, but that is fairly true here. He's also not a legal guy, right? So we need to read this in the vein of legal. And I think there's a couple of things that come out of this for me. In legal, there actually is, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, a really linear progression from Google search to hiring a client, the software to actually automate the process of tracking someone through that entire cycle, even all the way down to revenue. That is achievable. It does not have to be that expensive. We talked about CallRail just a little bit ago. And so in many cases, like I always use this example. You walk in on your spouse with the pool boy, you fire up Google and look for divorce lawyer, you click on the ad, you make a phone call, you hire the divorce lawyer. That's a fairly linear process, right? And it's often a one-off. It's very similar to criminal defense, DUI. This can happen in personal injury. Like, you are going to hire a lawyer right now. And a lot of the channels are very attributable. It doesn't mean they all are. And it doesn't mean that you might not have a big bucket of, I don't know, but some of this is extremely trackable. And why would you walk away from that? Right.
I agree. And my thing, which is, kind of a hedge and, but attribution is just a tool, right? It has limitations. Knowing what the limitations are valuable. But you kind of, to your point, you can have an expert on, a marketing expert. You can have Rand Fishkin working at your business. Now, one, you don't have Rand Fishkin working at your business. So Rand has a very experienced knowledge base to pull from. He's got very, amongst the most expert digital marketers out there. You don't have that. But two, the other side of that coin is...
Wait, are you saying our clients or our listeners may not be actually good at evaluating their marketing on their own?
I am saying that. In fact, many of those listeners probably responded to some of the surveys where lawyers acknowledge that they are not very good at doing it on their own. But in any event, it's a tool, right? So, and you need an expert or someone at least with some knowledge to actually interpret the data properly as well, because this goes, I think, to Rand's point. We expect the attribution systems to do too much heavy lifting, and we assume that they're working across the board, and they're not. They're limited. Even the most expensive ones, even the most fancy ones, have their limits. And still, even with the most sophisticated, fancy attribution system, having someone who can interpret the data and then make decisions, because that's the whole point of this, right? It's a tool that should inform your decision-making process about where you spend money, where you spend time, what's working, where clients are coming from. It still requires, someone with some knowledge to be able to actually interpret that data. So I wouldn't throw out attribution, but I do think keeping some perspective about it, it's important. And then the other thing is like, what level of sophistication do you need from your attribution system? And, that's just like asking a question of like, which kind of hammer do you need to build your house? If you get an air gun, an air nailer, there's some advantages to that. But there's certain places you're not going to use an air nailer on your trim molding, right? So maybe you would. That's a bad example, perhaps.
Wow. We got Bob Villa, the love child of Bob Villa and legal marketing going on this podcast. Welcome to a new, very, very small niche.
Yes, very bad example, but I think
home improvement and legal marketing.
You need a tool that can help you understand some of this stuff. But the risk is this, and we'll talk about this when we go into the tactical segment of the show. You're blindly following the attribution, and you got a last click attribution set up, and all of a sudden you're like, well, all of our clients.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna interrupt you with a question.
Okay,
Gyi. What is last click attribution? What is first click attribution? And why is this so important to understand?
Well, we're going to get into attribution models. The short version is which click is getting the credit for the potential client and client. Last click is the most recent one. First click is the first one that the system can find. But we'll talk about a little bit more about that. But the point is that if you don't have expertise in understanding what your attribution system is actually telling you, you can make some really misinformed decisions. And we've seen where it's like, we deploy marketing resources in a totally different way based on what attribution's saying. And all of a sudden the phone stops ringing, and it stops ringing because actually that places you were spending time and money before were actually generating business for you, but you didn't realize it because you misunderstood what was going on with attribution.
Money makes it makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round.